In March, this program detailed the story of a group of residents in the state's mid-north who say their health is being damaged by a local wind farm development. Their stories were among dozens sent to a federal parliamentary committee considering whether the two could be linked. That report was tabled yesterday, and wind farm critics say it's partially vindicated their viewpoints. In a moment, we'll speak with Dr. Sarah Laurie, who may herself face a wind farm next to her property and who's been campaigning for research into the issue. But first, Rebecca Bryce reports on the latest developments.
It feels like my head is in a vice.
These are the people who've been pushing for the winds of change in Victoria.
I can't remember the last night that I had a full night's sleep. Usually we wake up at least 5 or 6 times during the night.
And South Australia.
I was nauseous, and at night you can hear a very loud pounding if the wind's in the right direction.
And now they've succeeded, in part at least. The women are among dozens of people across Australia who blamed wind turbine noise and vibrations for making them sick. Trish Godfrey has since moved from her home in Warborough, north of Ballarat, after her property was bought by the wind power company Acciona. But it's her story and others which led to a Senate committee review of the social and economic impact of wind farms. The committee received more than 1,000 submissions and heard from all sides of the debate.
And then eventually heart palpitations, which were a massive concern.
Government risks choking wind farm development just when Australia needs a strong pipeline of projects.
Yesterday, in its final report, the committee called on the federal government to prioritise research into the possible health effects of the turbines, including low-level noise or infrasound. But its findings were qualified.
The committee does not doubt that some people living in close proximity to wind farms are experiencing adverse health effects, but these are not necessarily caused by the noise characteristically produced by wind turbines.
It's also recommended a new policy for setbacks be considered, along with a faster and more independent complaints method.
We have found that there have been adverse health effects found in some people near wind farms. However, and this is a very, very important however, we have not found that that is necessarily associated with noise or vibration.
The Clean Energy Council welcomes this report. It provides a balanced review of a number of the issues surrounding the development of wind farms, and it indicates that there is no need to slow the rollout of this technology across Australia.
In its defence, the industry has relied on a National Health and Medical Research Council statement that there is no published scientific evidence to positively link the turbines with adverse health effects. But the council says that statement has been taken out of context.
The context is a lack of evidence, so that statement isn't saying that there are no effects, it's saying we don't really know. And we'll await further evidence to find that out.
The Senate report isn't the only blow to wind farm developers this month. In a first for South Australia, a court rejected plans for an Acciona wind farm in the southeast because it would damage the visual amenity of the area. That's upset one of the state's strongest supporters of wind power.
A large part of our success in building an international reputation for hosting wind investment has been our commitment to making the regulatory environment as certain as possible. The government will now be considering its options for maintaining that certainty in the light of the court's decisions.
Back on the health issue, the Senate committee warns any research governments pursue may be open to criticism because they have a vested interest in the industry, including subsidies for renewable energy.
Dr. Sarah Laurie, welcome to 7:30 South Australia.
Thank you, Simon.
What's the significance of the Senate's report?
Look, Simon, I think it's hugely significant. This hasn't happened anywhere else in the world. And what the committee have recommended basically is that the epidemiological research is done, that there's infrasound and low-frequency noise measurements, particularly looking at what's happening inside people's bedrooms.
Do you feel vindicated?
Look, I think all of us who are involved in this and who've seen and heard the stories of people suffering and abandoning their homes and farms are delighted that at last a government somewhere in the world is taking some notice.
Why do you say that? Because the report says that they have no doubt that people are suffering health problems, but equally it's not necessarily related to wind farms. If they sat on the fence any harder, it would hurt.
Look, I think we need to do the research, and it's the scientific research that is going to establish this. There are many people who have different points of view. Let's do the science and find out what is in fact happening.
But some science has already been done, and that is what they're saying about the current finding. They have the current science. They have no doubt that people are suffering health effects, but that's not necessarily because of wind farms.
You're right, it's not a clear and unequivocal statement. However, I think that's where we need to do the science and really clear this up once and for all. There is some science, limited, which is highly suggestive that the turbines are in fact causing these health problems.
On that point about future developments, are you disappointed that the committee didn't recommend a moratorium, at least for proposals that are close to settlements, to farms, to houses?
Yes, we are disappointed about that. I can understand it's a difficult issue, and, you know, clearly there are many drivers for wind development, but I would have thought that major concerns about public health need to take precedence and take priority. And what I'm concerned about is that the developers will unfortunately seize this as an opportunity to continue business as usual and without, in fact, adopting a precautionary approach.
Does there need to be a moratorium? Is that what you're calling for?
What we've been calling for is a temporary halt in further approvals and construction of any turbines that are within 10 kilometres of people's homes.
One of the points made was that perhaps it is worry which is causing people to feel ill, worry about what might be happening. Do you accept that as a corollary of the work you do, you're adding to the worry?
Look, I do accept that. However, I think it's really important to point out that many of these people developed symptoms before I even was aware there was a problem. I've been called a scaremonger. I think it's far more accurate to actually call me a clinical whistleblower. There are serious problems emerging and they need to be investigated, and I'm delighted that the Senate has recommended that they should be.
Who should do that future research? Because the committee made the point that government has a vested interest in this and that both sides of the argument can use reports to bolster their arguments. So who's the independent person?
Look, I think it needs to be the best independent scientists and researchers that we've got.
Who is that?
There are a number of academic researchers who've put together study proposals. Professor Colin Hanson's team at Adelaide University, Dr Bob Thorne's team from Massey University. Perhaps a collaborative approach might be possible. I think now that the Senate has acknowledged that there is a need for research, I think the National Health and Medical Research Council are clearly more concerned, and I think the opportunity is now for the best researchers to come forward and properly investigate the problems.
Sarah Laurie, a pleasure to have you with us. Thanks for joining us on 7:30 South Australia.
That's a pleasure, Simon.